Welcome back. I'm Dr. Michelle Border, and in today's episode, I'm going to talk about the healing journey after trauma, what it looks like, how to heal, and how long it takes. Childhood trauma can cause a lot of pain, and until we learn to acknowledge, accept, and cope with that pain, our lives will not be as fulfilling and happy as it could be. A lot of borders were built up in our minds from that pain, and I'm going to guide you in how you can start breaking down those borders. So let's get started doing that right now. I recently saw a meme on Instagram that said, "Healing will cost you the relationships that relied on your silence, your people-pleasing, or the overextension of yourself. They might not survive because you put your needs over theirs." This means that the abusers in your life are counting on you being the person they created through their abuse. But that isn't the real you, and that caused you a lot of pain that is still affecting you today. You deserve to heal from that pain and become the best person that you can be. According to the meme, that may cause people from your past, and maybe also your present if you have people in your life now that are like your abusers, to not like the new you because they can no longer control you anymore. But let me assure you, healing is worth whatever happens. It brings freedom to be yourself, a happiness you have never known, and positive coping behaviors for dealing with the pain of trauma. Today I'm going to tell you what I have done to work on my healing journey. I'll tell you what has worked and what hasn't. The first step for me in healing was to understand what happened to me that caused me to be the person I had become. I was often sad, always anxious, and unhappy with many aspects of my life and personality. All of that pain built up for me around the age of 40, and I realized I was in a deep depression and felt no hope of getting out of it. I sought help with a counselor and was extremely fortunate to be paired with someone who I connected well with. She talked to me in a way that made me feel comfortable, like I was normal and not the awful things I had believed from my mother, and guided me to have more positive thoughts and feelings by working through the emotions and experiences that had caused the negative ones. In the beginning of my sessions, she asked me about my past, pulling out experiences that had built borders in my mind. The first step was to recognize what happened to me as a child. Healing starts with recognition of what happened in the past to bring you to this point. It's not about asking what is wrong with you, but instead, what happened to you? What kind of abuse was done to you? What borders did this create in your mind? What borders are you still carrying with you today? How are your past experiences affecting you now? If you aren't sure about this one, ask someone you trust to tell you what they see that you struggle with. I have had people tell me that I need to have more confidence, that I need to stop apologizing, and to not take on so much work. These statements have been clues to me of what I need to work on. Recognizing what happened to you does not mean you accept or condone what happened. You are just naming it and understanding that it happened to you. You did not cause it and are not inherently bad, burdensome, or worthless, as your abuser may have told you or made you feel. There are some things to think about as you reflect on your childhood about what happened to you. In episode 4, I talked about neglect, abuse, and trauma. Based on those explanations, do you feel you experienced abuse, neglect, or trauma? What behaviors did your abuser show you? Like, was there physical pain, verbal abuse, emotional neglect, or physical neglect? I personally experienced physical and verbal abuse, along with emotional neglect and manipulation. Determine the consequences you experienced because of those events. In episode 9, I discussed personality disorders and coping mechanisms, And in episode 11, I discussed coping behaviors. Based on those descriptions, what things do you see in yourself? Because of my childhood experiences, I have low self-esteem, self-worth, and struggle with self-identity. I experience hypervigilance and anxiety every day. I have borders in my mind about my physical appearance, my intelligence, and abilities. Because of these characteristics, I develop people-pleasing, imposter syndrome, addictive, and depression behaviors. Are those consequences causing problems with you being your best self and feeling happy? I answer this question with yes. I feel pretty shitty about myself all around and struggled for years to have healthy relationships where I was not manipulated or abused. You also need to reflect on your emotional needs and wants. In episode 3, I discussed emotional development through childhood. In that episode, I described what normal emotional development would produce and what traumatic environments would produce. What do you think you were not given in that area as a child? How has it affected you through life? Have you craved certain emotional care from others? Are you an affectionate person? Does affection make you feel uncomfortable? Do you have confidence in yourself? Do you think poorly about yourself? How do you like the people closest to you to treat you? What did you want your parents to do for you emotionally that they didn't? My parents were not emotionally supportive, didn't teach me how to manage emotions or allow me to feel emotions. They did not provide examples of healthy social interactions, so I have struggled with how to maintain healthy relationships. I wish I had a better understanding of emotional and social intelligence so that I could have had more positive experiences in my life. Another question to examine is, are your emotional needs being met in your relationships today? Or are the people closest to you treating you in ways that your parents did? In my first marriage, I chose someone who was a lot like my parents. He was not emotionally available, supportive, or willing to hear about my feelings. My current husband does all that. But over the years, before I started my healing journey, I also had relationships with friends that were similar to the way my parents treated me. Until I worked through what had happened to me as a child, I couldn't see how I was choosing to have it happen with my current relationships. Another question is, how would you like to have your emotional needs met? Do you know what you want from people who you have relationships with? I'm an affectionate person who likes to be supported emotionally, made to feel that what I am feeling is okay, and respected by those around me. They may not agree with my feelings, but they are willing to understand and accept that that is how I feel without criticism or dismissal. Are you able to communicate what you need to those around you? Do you have words to express what you like? Before I started my healing journey, I could not do this. I didn't have the skills or the knowledge of how to express my feelings and needs after years of having them suppressed. I was not allowed to have feelings or needs, let alone express them to my mother. As an adult, I did not know how, recognize, or feel comfortable expressing my needs and emotions. It took some time in counseling to understand how to do this and how to recognize what needs and emotions I actually had. Now that I can, I not only find myself happier and more fulfilled in life, but I am having deeper connections in my relationships. It may be possible that you can't answer some of these questions because you were never taught how to communicate your feelings, never allowed to have feelings, so you don't know what you feel or what you want to feel, and probably weren't allowed to express your true feelings, so this may feel uncomfortable to you. Try starting by making lists of experiences that happened when you were a child, and listing the feelings you felt in that moment. I mentioned in a previous episode that my mother would go on verbally abusive rants, telling me what an awful, burdensome, and worthless person I was. When I think about those times, I recognize that I felt angry, hopeless, and confused because I was trying so hard not to be that person that she said I was. I believed what she said, and then felt shame because I was so awful, angry that I hadn't changed when I was trying so hard to, and sad that I was such an awful person, and my self-confidence was taking a beating. Years of these feelings and the abuse led me to having a lot of borders in my mind about who I was. Acknowledging what happened to me helped me to see that it was not my fault, that I'm not the awful person my mother said I was, and that I needed to break down those borders my mother built to see myself for who I truly am. The next step towards healing is acceptance. We have to accept that what happened to us was hurtful, has caused problems with us developing into the person we can be, and that we didn't deserve to be treated that way. Some people don't want to accept the fact that they were abused, because that means they have to admit that there is something wrong with them, so to speak, and they should do some work to be a better person. Not everyone wants to do that work, and that's okay for them, but I think they will never reach a full level of happiness with themselves and in their relationships. By working on your emotional health, you gain insight into how to control and process your emotions and understand the emotions of others. This leads to better connections in relationships, better reactions and coping in future experiences, and better feelings about yourself. Since I have started my healing, I have more confidence in myself. I like myself more, have deeper connections with relationships, and process my emotions more positively when interacting with others. In general, I am a much happier person and enjoy life so much more than before I started this journey. I understand the resistance to working on healing, but I feel it is so worth it. If you experience childhood trauma, you are a victim. Bad things were done to you on purpose that caused you extreme physical and emotional pain. However, acceptance of what happened and that you are a victim does not give you permission to develop a victim complex. Some people use their identity as a victim as an excuse for their behavior or to blame others for what they have become. They have no desire to work to change or improve their life. Again, this is fine if that's what they want, but I believe they will struggle to have true happiness and feel good about themselves. The last step of starting on the healing journey is to work on the issues you realize you struggle with. Now that you have identified what has happened to you and the effects it has had on you, you can look at how you can improve those effects so that you break down the borders created in your mind from the trauma. My first suggestion is to seek a counselor who has knowledge of working with childhood trauma. As I mentioned earlier, I was so fortunate to find a counselor the first time I went that had experience with childhood trauma and that I felt comfortable with. This is not typically the case, and if you do go see a counselor and don't feel comfortable or that they aren't really helping you, please do not give up on trying this method. Once you find a counselor who you are compatible with, you will be able to talk freely about your experiences. They will ask questions that will prompt you to think through your emotions and behaviors to reach a better outlook. For example, when I told my counselor that I felt worthless, she asked me if I could describe something I do that proved I have worth. I told her that I was a mother of 2 sons and that I was a teacher who helped children learn. She helped me to see that I am doing things that are worthy. She also gave me an assignment until my next appointment to recognize things I did that prove I have worth. She never told me what or how to think or feel, but guided me to think and feel for myself in a more positive way. I do need to be honest about one thing. Going to counseling was not always easy. There were times that I had to relive some of my past experiences, and that stirred up some strong emotions that I did not want to experience again. There were a couple of times after a session that I would have to sit in my car a while until I could stop crying so I could see to drive. Trying to change my thinking patterns, coping behaviors, and experiencing new feelings was not always easy. It has taken a lot of work, some frustration, and even more tears to get to where I am today. But where I am today is the happiest I have ever felt in my life. I'm not completely fixed or healed yet, and not sure I ever will be completely. but the time spent with my counselor set me up to know what to do when struggling with the effects from my past. I continue to learn and grow on this healing journey so that I am being the happiest and best version of me that can be. To also help me continue on my healing path, I read a lot of books. I check out mental health websites and listen to podcasts that talk about being mentally and emotionally healthy. There are many different techniques out there for dealing with childhood trauma. All of us have experienced different situations, are different people, and react in different ways. It's safe to say that we may need different methods on our healing journey. I don't think we can ever have too much information about anything, but the key is to hone in on the information that works for you. Another thing I do is journaling. When I have a lot on my mind or feeling a lot of emotions, sometimes it helps me to write them down, to get them out of my head and onto paper. During the process of writing, I'm able to process my thoughts, think about what I'm truly feeling, and then think about how those feelings are affecting my life. Sometimes it's hard for childhood trauma survivors to understand and communicate what they are feeling because they weren't taught how or allowed to as children. Writing allows me to do that. The other day, someone said to me that they like my journal prompts on my website, but they hate to write. I suggested they use a voice-to-text recording device and say what they are thinking. They could then go back later and look it over, evaluate the thoughts and feelings, and make notes on how it's affecting their life. If journaling is not for you, with pen or digitally, then maybe you can gain some insight through reading self-help books. I have read many and have many more on my shelf waiting for me. I will continue to add books to my suggested reading page on my website so that you can check out the ones I have read. I enjoy these books because it helps me to see that, 1, I'm not alone in what has happened to me, and that what I feel about it is normal, and 2, because I sometimes have other suggestions for my healing journey that I didn't know about. The fact of understanding we're not alone, not crazy, or not to blame for what happened to us, is sometimes healing in itself. Another method of helping through the healing journey is self-talk. My counselor tried to teach me this method, but to be honest, I still struggle with it. Self-talk is your inner voice that says things about you like, "Good job," or "You idiot, why did you do that?" Our self-talk is programmed by our childhood experiences. If you have abusive or negative experiences as a child, you will likely have negative self-talk. If you have positive, supportive experiences as a child, then of course you will have positive self-talk. But if you have negative self-talk, it is suggested that you reframe your self-talk when you're healing. The idea is that when a negative thought comes to mind about yourself, then you reframe it to be a positive thought. For example, when I look in the mirror and think, "You are so ugly," I'm supposed to reframe that thought to, "You are a beautiful woman." If I mess something up and think, "You are such a failure," I'm supposed to reframe that thought to think, "You are successful, and it is proven when you..." fill in the blank here. I am struggling with this because I can say positive self-talk to myself, but I don't always believe it to be true. I'm trying to realize that this is the lies my mother told me as a child, that she created these borders in my mind, and I have to learn how to feel differently about myself. And so, my healing journey is continuing. Another helpful action during healing is finding someone you can connect with, feel safe with, and share your healing process with. Throughout my healing journey, I've had many people be supportive, provide suggestions, and be there to listen when I needed to work through my emotions and reactions. This person can also provide a positive voice that can counter the negative one your abusers used on you. And sometimes it's just good to vent and let out your thoughts, emotions, and hurt. Bottling it all up is not helpful and can lead to more stress. If you don't have someone in your life that you feel safe talking to, then check out some support groups through social media. Having another person in your life that understands what you have been through doesn't judge, and offers empathy can make a huge difference in your healing journey. During the healing process, you may struggle to be around your abusers. This is because just being in their presence or even thinking about being around them can trigger anxiety in you to the point that you are so stressed you are uncomfortable. It is difficult to heal when you are mentally and emotionally put back into the feelings and emotions of being an abused child. You may want to consider creating boundaries or going no contact for some time so you can heal without being triggered. Boundaries are limitations you set to protect your mental and emotional health when around your abuser. This could be deciding that you are only going to be around them for a limited amount of time, that you're not going to discuss certain topics with them, or that you will make a decision to walk away from a situation with your abuser that is triggering you. No contact is just that. You have no contact for a period of time with your abuser because their toxicness is too much to deal with while you are healing from it. I ultimately decided to do this with my mother because she wouldn't stop the abuse. Even as an adult, she manipulated, insulted, and lied about me to the point that I saw there would be no end to it. Without her accepting her role in my abuse, which she totally denied, I could not heal from it. It was a very difficult decision I had to make, not one I made lightly, but one I needed to make for my own mental health. I have been criticized for this decision and been told, "But she's your mother. She gave birth to you." And to this I say, just because she gave birth to me does not mean she is allowed to abuse me. These people have no idea what I lived through at the hands of my mother, or the fact that she made no attempt to make amends or change her toxic behavior. I commend anyone who is strong enough to go no contact with an abuser and recognize what a difficult decision that was to make. I need you to know that the healing timeline may not have a finish line. You may do the work to heal, improve your mindset, work on your emotional issues, making great progress, and then one day experience something that sets you back in your healing. That's okay. You didn't develop these negative behaviors and issues in one day, so healing from them is going to take a while. I'm almost 15 years in and still working on and growing in my journey. Give yourself some patience and time to travel your healing journey path. The key is to stay on the path. Triggers can rise up at any time, in any place, and without warning. I've experienced situations where I was triggered, and it took a couple of days to rationalize and process what happened. Sometimes I shut down, then take some time to process and work through my feelings, and finally process my emotions in a healthy way. This may take a few hours or a few days. Other times, it may not take as long, but I continue to learn how to cope with and recognize my triggers so they don't control my behaviors anymore. Don't expect a quick fix. It will take some work and time, but again, it is totally worth working through your healing journey. So what can we do to get through those rough days? Or to cope when in the tough times of triggers? I have found that allowing myself to indulge in self-care is very helpful during those times. I see healing as work I'm doing to improve myself and my relationships. And hard work sometimes deserves a reward. So think about what brings you joy, peace, or just a mental break. Find things you enjoy doing that put peace in your soul. That could be things like artistic hobbies, physical activities outdoors or at a gym, indoor activities like reading, writing, or games. It could even be just 15 minutes alone in the dark with silence to give yourself some quiet time to find peace in your soul. I like to have downtime at home on the couch with a blanket, my dog, and a favorite TV show to offer an escape from my healing work. Sometimes I enjoy a glass of wine or a sweet treat with that escape. Other times I spend time with a friend or family member that brings me joy. Once in a while, I treat myself to an experience, like trying something new I've never done before. As you decide what you're going to do to provide yourself with care, make sure you're choosing things that are healthy for you. However you decide to move through your healing journey, the key is to continue to break those borders that are falsely created in you as a child. Make sure you are finding healthy ways to release pain and disillusions from your abuse, to improve your self-esteem and realize you are worthy and important, and to strengthen your resilience to handle life's stresses. Remember, you are not broken. You are in the process of becoming your true self. Childhood trauma, abuse, and neglect can affect us all through our lives in negative ways. It is up to us to decide that we are not going to allow those negative behaviors to control our lives. It is not an easy task, but one that is well worth the effort. Continue to listen to future episodes of my podcast on your favorite podcast provider, and follow me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Thanks for listening.